Welcome back, everyone. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's panelists, and please note that their full bios are available at your table. From my far left, Mike Gamson leads LinkedIn's Global Solutions Organization across the company's 30 offices worldwide, focused on helping companies large and small leverage LinkedIn to transform the way they hire, market, sell, and learn. Mike leads various functions ranging from field sales and professional services representatives to research analysts, account managers, and operational experts. Previously, he was a director of Advent Software, a provider of enterprise software for investment managers, where he led the trading and order management business. Mike began his career as an entrepreneur in Costa Rica, where he owned both a hotel and a restaurant.
How do you like that?
Immediately to Mike's right is Chris Gladwin, who is co-founder and CEO of Oceant, whose mission is to successfully provide the leading platform in the world that uses to analyze its largest data sets. Prior to Oceant, Chris founded CleverSafe in 2004, which became the largest and most strategic object storage vendor in the world. He raised over $100 million and then led the company to a $1.3 billion exit when CleverSafe was sold to IBM in 2015 for over $1.3 billion. The technology CleverSafe created is used by most people in the US every day and generated more than 1,000 patents, either granted or filed, creating one of the 10 most powerful patent portfolios in the world. Penny Pritzker is the founder and chairman of PSP Partners, a global private investment firm that takes a long-term fundamental approach to investing in and building market-leading businesses in sectors such as professional services, real estate, technology, agriculture, industrial services, and consumer products. From June 2013 through January 2017, Penny served as U.S. Secretary of Commerce in the Obama administration. She was a core member of President Obama's economic team and served as the country's chief commercial advocate, leading the administration's trade and investment promotion efforts. Penny and Chris also serve as chairs of the P33 initiative, which brings together Chicago business leaders to promote strategies and policies that will revolutionize the city's technology ecosystem. Please join me in welcoming Mike, Chris, and Penny.
Welcome.
So Penny, I'm going to start with you. We can look out at a full ballroom here today, and it's obvious there's a high degree of interest in the work that you're doing, promoting Chicago as a technology leader. I'm going to assume that there's a variety of levels of knowledge about exactly what you're doing. So I have a two-pronged question. One is, could you give us the 101 on P33? And secondly, I am sure you were asked by many people to get involved in many wonderful opportunities and projects. So my question is, the second question is, why P33?
Let me start with the second question, then I'll go to the first question. One of the things that I had the good fortune of observing as Secretary of Commerce was I visited over 60 or 70 cities in the United States, and I got to see what other cities were doing to promote and position themselves to be able to take advantage of the technology revolution and disruption that's affecting all of us. And so when I got back to Chicago and I was trying to figure out how to reintegrate into our beloved community that I care so much about, one of the things I wanted to do was, and I had been fortunate enough to also help lead the development of the first ever digital policy for the United States of America, was I really wanted to know our tech leadership better. And I didn't know folks like Chris before. And so this really, this whole project came of getting to know new friends. And second is from seeing what others are doing and recognizing that if we don't do something, we're going to get left behind. And maybe that leads then to your first question is, what is P33? And let me take you back just a little bit because I think it's useful for all of us. The thesis of P33 started in a conversation that Chris really raised the issue of Chicago's punching below its weight as a tech hub. We're the third largest city in the country, but on most tech indices, we rank 6 to 10. And so that led us to really create a vision. We brought together about 150 university, business, established company leaders, tech leaders, government leaders, to say, how do we transform Chicago into a tier 1 global tech hub by 2033? That's the vision. And so where does the name come from? What is P33? And 33 is, in 2033 will be the 100th anniversary of the World's Fair, where Chicago was celebrated as the innovation bright spot in the world. And so it's a nostalgic, it's about our history, but it's really also about our future. We need to re-embrace that kind of action and thinking. P is really about purpose, plans, people, and that if we don't come together with that kind of purpose, if we don't put a plan together, if we don't, all of us come together, that we're not going to achieve this goal. And I think 33 is also about, this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. And so what did we do? And what is this? The first thing that we did as a group, and the first folks who got involved are not going to be the only folks, so at the end of the day, we're going to ask all of you, please help us. We began with research. We began with research about Chicago, and we're really tough on ourselves. And Oscar Munoz really was particularly the CEO of United, said, if we don't understand ourselves and diagnose the problem right, whatever answers we come up with will become useless. And so we did BCG, McKinsey, Accenture, did a ton of research comparing us to other cities in the country. We did a gap analysis along a technology evolution line. And we also did a survey. McKinsey led a survey of over 1,000 tech leaders outside of Chicago and of a significant number of our tech and non-tech business leaders in Chicago so that we could understand not just our assets, because we're really good at knowing our assets, but that we're really frank with ourselves, what are the challenges? And what we found is we have these great assets. We have incredible talent in the sense we're the number 2 producers of software development engineers in the country. We have these extraordinary universities. We have the national labs, which we should not forget because those are great magnets for significant government funding and great research. We have the greatest diversity of businesses of any major city in the country. We have M-Hub. We have DDMI, which is now part of UI Labs. We have 1871. We're an affordable city. We have great food. We have great entertainment. We have great livability. It's a place people want to be. But we're punching below our weight. What's going on? And a lot of these incredible efforts that are going on in our city, they're disconnected. They're important in their own right, but they're untethered to larger themes. And they're not at scale, and they're not well known outside our city. So that one of the things we learned about ourselves is the perception of Chicago is very different than our own perception of ourselves. And I'm not going to go into the specifics of that right now. But all of this research led us to first develop a set of principles. We said we want to develop less than a half a dozen major initiatives that we're going to undertake. But in doing so, what are the principles that are going to guide us in developing these initiatives? And the first was we want to position Chicago as a go-to city for tech innovation. And the second is we want to drive inclusive growth in the tech sector and in our entire economy. And the inclusivity is a big part of, a significant part of what we're doing, not the only part, but it's not an adjunct, it's central. We want to leverage our existing assets and our existing initiatives. We feel fundamentally that the private sector needs to lead this effort, that our established businesses and our tech companies need to come together. And that was something that was shocking to me when I returned to Chicago. We had our established companies kind of living in this orbit, meeting in these groups, getting together, and we had our tech companies over here. And they were not, the Venn diagram overlap was pretty slight, if at all. And that's a problem for us to remain a successful city. And the last thing is that we require the public sector support, but we're going to lead as opposed to follow the public sector. And so that led us to develop 4 major initiatives to begin to address the situation in Chicago. And I'll touch briefly on those and we can go into more detail. The first is we need to bolster our talent base. And we need to retain the top tech grads that we're producing. We need to better align degrees with what employers need. We need to foster middle skills tech talent. And we need to be known for being a place of lifelong learning. It's easy to pick up a skill, learn, add a credential, and so that the whole issue of bolstering our tech base was one initiative. The second was we need to support deep science commercialization. And that requires that we have to have a plan, I'm going to use a government word, mechanisms and infrastructure to drive joint commercialization across our universities, our labs, and our private sector. The point being, we don't have a plan right now. We don't have regular functionality that encourages that, and we don't have sort of the infrastructure that makes that possible. So that's the second issue, supporting deep science commercialization. We have phenomenal deep science going on. We're not really taking advantage of it in a systematic way. The third is to nurture clusters of excellence and partnerships in sectors of the economy where we in Chicago have a natural right to win. And that effort has to be significant. The clusters that we go after to win need to be able to move the needle for the Chicago economy. If you thought about, Chris often says this, Chicago economy is a $900 billion to $1 trillion economy. We can't go after small things. We have to go after large initiatives that will move the needle. And we need to do it for all Chicagoans, not just those of us in this room, but if we're going to win over a long period, we've got to make sure that's available to more Chicagoans. And finally, we have to tell our story. We don't just have a PR problem, but we definitely have a PR problem. We tell our story internally, meaning to ourselves and to our graduates who are leaving. At least 50% of them are leaving. And they feel basically that they need to go to the coast to get credentialing in order to be in a tech field. That's nuts. We need to change that and reverse that. But we also need to tell it externally because our research showed there's enormous misperception about Chicago. So I'll just close by saying, where are we at today? We're analyzing our cluster focus, and Chris can go into more detail about that because he's really good at that, among 8,000 other things, including all those patents. But fundamentally, this was his idea. He's just got us all working really hard on it. Second is fleshing out the specific actions in each initiative. And we've got specific ideas, but we're in the process of shaping those. And the third is to put together a small team and a small nonprofit that can lead the execution because Kelly Welsh, who's not here today from the Civic Committee, Chris and I are recognizing we also have day jobs that we're supposed to be doing. But I'll leave you with the final thought. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint. This is something we all in this city have got to embrace, or we as a city are going to get left behind. And frankly, we're not on the radar of most evaluations about what are the major tech cities in the country. And the second thing I would say is if you want to learn more, go to our website, p33chicago.com. So that's a
Terrific.
quick but hopefully broad overview.
So Chris, I would like to kind of build on some of the points that Penny raised. You've been a long-time entrepreneur in Chicago.
Right.
You had a baseline level of knowledge that was exceptional. But a lot more research was done as you were putting the P33 plan together. Can you tell us a little bit about things that you learned that were new, and both on the positive end and the negative end in terms of Chicago's place in the overall U.S. technology marketplace, our global technology marketplace?
So one of the things that I think is encouraging as you hear different people speak who are Chicago business leaders, we're starting to get more educated about ourselves. Things like knowing that we have the second most college graduates, the second most computer science workers, the most educated big city that Crain's reported, by the way. Those are things that even though we were in that community, we didn't really know. And there's definitely some good things. There's definitely some weaknesses we have to address. So really getting that awareness was important. And then the research that Penny mentioned that was done, we did net promoter scores. I think most of you are familiar with that concept of Chicago as a tech community. And we asked people in the Chicago tech community as well as other tech communities, Denver, Boston, San Francisco, et cetera, about Chicago. And then we asked about each other's tech community. And what's the net promoter score, as well as some objective kind of questions like where are the most college graduates and things like that. And what we found is asking over 1,000 people across the United States in tech communities is that everyone over the net promoter score in your community by your community is higher than everybody else thinks. So every community thinks better themselves than everyone else does. That's normal. But one of the things that I think we had a sense of, but we didn't really realize till we saw the numbers, was that one, Chicago's own net promoter score of its community is lower than anyone else's own net promoter score of its own community. So if we think we're cheerleaders, we're not.
We have a
compared to everyone
self-esteem
else.
problem in terms.
Yeah, but worse off is everyone else's net promoter score of us is by far lower. So our brand is by far the weakest. And then if you ask objective questions, like if you told people that, what's the most educated big city in the United States, and it's Chicago, they would be, their jaw would be on the floor. So I think it's in our kind of Midwestern character that we don't want to oversell ourselves, but we are so far behind the facts that we've got a long way to go. So one of the things that we're thinking that means is, we have to develop what are our talking points. What's the brand of Chicago's tech community? What are the things we say about it when we have 3 words, when we have 15 words, when we have 200 words? What do we say? And develop, those strong and consistent messages. And ultimately, I think it doesn't end up as a commercial. That doesn't really work. But it's really the thousands of people in our community promote that. And, we do talk, to people across the United States. So that's, I think, one of the things that it surprised me, surprised all of us, but at the same time, it really reflected kind of what we were feeling.
Can I just jump in?
Of course.
But you wouldn't say, Chris, that's our only challenge.
Oh, no.
We have a PR
Just one.
challenge. It's one of the other, and talk a little bit about the clusters and the idea that, we have areas of right to win. And if you think New York, fintech, or you think of Boston, biotech, you think, Silicon Valley, software, I don't know, Seattle cloud or something like that, what we have to, we're not in that word association.
Yeah, I actually haven't even sent this to you or anyone. I was just thinking, like, what would our brand be if we had 2 words? And I was thinking business tech. Mm-hmm. And then the clusters that fit in that. And what we did in doing the clusters, BCG and McKinsey did a lot of work on this if we're $1 trillion economy and we're thinking about the next 10, 15 years, what we're looking at is not just how big are these industries, but how much growth is there in these industries. And so if we want to move a $1 trillion economy, there's got to be trillions of dollars of new market that we can go get a big share of. So you want it to be big. It can't be everything. It can't be too big. So we needed a few $1 trillion of new, and we picked.
I'm going to swing back to that with a specific question
Okay.
in a moment.
I'll wait.
But I want to give Mike a chance. So much of the narrative we hear about Chicago, and that we're even hearing more of this afternoon, is that Chicago mints a lot of really high-quality tech talent out of its universities. But they all
This is
leave.
accurate. The first part's accurate.
Yes. But that they all leave Chicago, and therefore there's a deficit of talent in Chicago as these students migrate to the coast. You've done some research at LinkedIn. You've got, obviously, the whole LinkedIn database to pull upon. I sense the story is a little more nuanced than that. And I'm wondering, just based on the research you've done for today and for the future, whether you can give us some insights into the talent migration or retention.
Yeah, for sure. So you're right in the case that Chicago has and you've heard already here, Chicago has an incredible educational system that are outputting fantastic tech-ready workers in computer science, in data science, in electrical engineering. And it's true that some of those graduates go to the coasts. But can anyone name the city, and we're an intimate group here, you can just shout it out, name the city that is most likely, if you are a graduate in computer science, the most likely city that you will live in after graduation is? Boston? Yeah, the answer is Chicago. By a mile, by like 8 times as much as the next city, which is San Francisco, and 10 times as much as the next city, which is Seattle. So as you walk away from today, and I'm a big believer when you come, you've invested your time, you've come here today for a reason. The chicken, perhaps. The community, or a few data points. I want one of those things that you walk away with to know that if you are a computer science graduate in the city of Chicago, the most likely place that you are going to live is here. People, we have the people. The great irony that I am frequently confronted by as a LinkedIn person and as a passionate member of our tech community is that the folks who are looking for talent believe the talent is not here, and the talent believe that the jobs are not here. That's a matching problem. That's a solvable problem. You know, it's a really hard problem when no one wants to move to your city to get educated. That is a 100-year solution. You got to start universities. You have to build a brand. You have to be better than everyone else. That is not our problem, thankfully. We have a lot of the folks here, and we are a massive draw for the Midwest. If many of you in this room probably grew up in other Midwestern states and cities, and you chose to come here, you chose to build your careers here, to raise your families here for all the reasons that Penny talked about, this city crushes it, people. It's a great place to be. We are a huge draw for the Midwest. We are import human beings and skill sets, technical skill sets. If you're a Python engineer, you're more likely to move here. We are a net exporter to the coasts, perhaps surprisingly, of business skills, MBAs, business development skills. Those folks are going to the coasts. So I think the great news for our city is that we're halfway home on the problem of talent because those human beings are here. Those men and women chose to be here or were born here. Our universities have attracted them. Increasingly, our companies are attracting them, but they're already here. And so our job as a community of business people is to make it known that we have those opportunities and to reach out. And I think as I look around this room, I think it's actually an interesting kind of microcosm of what Penny was talking about with respect to what you noticed when you came back and you saw the separation of traditional business leaders and tech leaders. There are 2 or 3 tables here that have almost all the tech people in them, isolated in their little tech mini cluster.
Yeah.
Make some new friends. Like, this is what we are here to do. And so it's real. You're looking around, you're like, am I at one of those tables? Or is that why they're dressed so poorly? And so again, maybe last thought, and then I'll hand back. if you care about this idea, if you are interested in doing something within your own area of influence or control to begin to move the needle, and you're in a traditional business sector, a non-tech sector, there is some entrepreneur here who is hoping that the company that she is building will be worthy of you as a client. Just open your mind a little bit to taking that call. Our first reaction as a business leader is to not engage with anyone. Even if you don't buy the product, even if you are uninterested in the potential benefits that could accrue to you through the business transformation that technology provides, just be open to it. Build a bridge, accept a meeting, take a call.
Chris, I'm going to swing back to some discussions we had earlier and that Penny alluded to, which was this gap between, quote, the traditional business economy in Chicago and the tech community. What do you think the root causes of that are? Do you think that the legacy Chicago companies are viewed as being behind in technology and that they're not relating appropriately to those that are pioneers in new technology? Tell us a little bit of that, about that gap and how it can be closed starting today.
It's hard to say what the root causes are. We've learned a lot about like how to characterize it and how to measure it. It seems like part of it has to do with Chicago's established business community has been here a long time. I think that probably is why, and it was kind of up and running before the tech thing happened. The things that are indicated are, as Mike was just saying, kind of those relationships just don't exist. I mean, one of the things we experienced in P33 on purpose, we wanted not only the coordinating committee, but each of the working groups to have co-chairs from both the established and the entrepreneurial tech communities. And we wanted membership to kind of be distributed between those two groups, as well as universities and other civic groups. And at first, we would have the meetings of the working group, and all the established people would sit on one side of the table, and all the entrepreneurial people on the other side of the table would be chit-chatting because we all know each other. And that's a measure. But now we've gotten to know each other, and now we've become friends. So as Mike was saying, I think kind of getting to know that, kind of reaching across the aisle, so to speak, and getting to know that other community is important. But it's got to be more than just, hey, I know that person, I saw him at a lunch. Yeah. Other measures you would look at would be how much investment is going on by established business companies in entrepreneurial companies, direct investment. How often are new companies here finding their first customers here? Are board members from the entrepreneurial community represented on these established company boards? Now, that's important on both sides. One of the things that's motivating P33 is the biggest issue facing, which we've heard from the established business community, is information technology isn't just something they have to do, it's something they have to lead at if they want to be a leader as a company or in their industry, period, in the next 15 years. We've heard that loud and clear. And one of the reasons you want to do that is a lot of industries will get disrupted by a new technology. The taxi industry kind of had to deal with ride sharing, and the music industry had to deal with digital music, et cetera. And if you don't have kind of awareness of that starting at your board level, you're not in really good shape. There's people like me and others that this is what we do for a living, is we look for these opportunities to disrupt industries and companies. We know how to do it, we know what to look for. We would be very helpful in helping companies prepare and also become the disruptor as opposed to becoming disrupted. So that would be an indication. Going the other way, it's really important for new companies to get their first customer. And one of the advantages that Chicago has is we have the most diverse large economy in the United States. This should be a place where new companies, especially those here, get their first customers. Unfortunately, if you look at sales data of established company, or let's say of new technology companies, what regions of the United States are the ones that produce their initial customers? Chicago, the Midwest, and the Southeast are laggards by a lot. You look at sales data, even my company, CleverSafe, that was located here, our number one market was Silicon Valley. Our number two market was London. Our number three market was New York or Tokyo. Way down the list, kind of with, at the noise level was Chicago, and we were in Chicago. That's a problem.
So Penny, I want to swing back to you for a second, because what we've laid out here is a very exciting and ambitious initiative. And I raise this question because it's come up a couple of times from the audience members, is we have a lot of heavy hitters and very important people involved in the P33 project, both from the corporate side and from the tech startup side. What is the governance structure going to be? Where does the buck ultimately stop in terms of where you place your bets, where you go next?
Well, I think, simply put, we're going to create now a 501c3. We'll have a board, and then we'll probably, around each of the 4 major initiatives, have advisory groups that work on those areas. We're not trying to boil the ocean here. I think that the idea, it's really, what are, as I said, 4 or 5 major things we can do as a group that can change the narrative, change the facts on the ground. And so, for example, you've heard the mayor, you've heard the governor, both the previous governor and the new governor talk about DPI. Mm-hmm. So if you think about, okay, the state's going to make a major investment in an innovation center, right? And our state university is going to play a leading role along with partnership with other universities. We ought to make sure that that initiative is aligned with these areas where we think Chicago has a natural right to win, mm-hmm. right? And not just Chicago, for the state. It's not just, DPI is bigger than that. That's a kind of an important role and engagement. So governance is about choosing, because the reality is 1,000 flowers are going to bloom in Chicago. We're good at this. We're entrepreneurial, we create businesses, et cetera, et cetera. But how do we attack the challenges that we've got that, that Chris talked about in terms of our, the perception, the Net Promoter Score? How do we also, from an actual execution standpoint, make sure that we're making the most of these fabulous assets that we have created? And they're all kind of sitting, doing their own thing right now, and they're not coalescing to produce a step function change that'll allow our economy to have this kind of robust growth.
So in terms of picking areas of opportunity, and this again has come up from the audience, which is one of Chicago's strengths has been the fintech sector, partially because of our history as being a leading trading hub for the world. Other than fintech and your initial exploration process, have any other pockets come up that you see as promising opportunities for Chicago?
Yeah, the areas we're looking at, which I was talking about under the umbrella of business tech,
yep.
Would include advanced manufacturing. Advanced manufacturing, if you just look in the next 10 years of new revenue associated with advanced manufacturing, it's enormous. It's trillions of dollars. I think it's $5 trillion. It's huge. So that's a great market, and our right to win is very high. Our ability to say, here's all the things we bring to the table to be a leader in that. Chicago is really well positioned. Another area is advanced logistics, same thing. Huge market, our right to win is very significant. And then the third one is business IT, using information technology in business. Our right to win is not quite as high, but good enough to make the claim. And it's also a big area. So those are the three that we're looking at under the business.
Mike, how does that jive with some of the data that you've gathered at LinkedIn?
I think it's right on. And I think there's a lot of awareness, I think, for how diverse Chicago's economy is, and therefore, and to Penny's point about places that we have the right to win, I think it would be not in service of our cause to try to manufacture from scratch something that we don't already have advantages in, already have momentum in. What's going on right now in the city in logistics, as an example, is a great, I think, example of that. There's some incredible startups here in the city that have real momentum established in the logistics area because we have a history in logistics. There's a great history on as fintech meets established business in things like risk and compliance. There's great companies. LogicGate's a great company that is taking some old business experience and porting it into the new. And then we have some incredibly new ideas that many people would not think about as core Chicago companies. Consumer tech, which has really been the mainstay of the West Coast. You know, in the room we have the founder and CEO of Cameo, which, by the way, if you haven't checked out Cameo yet, do yourself a favor, buy one, hook up someone you care about. Cameo, that's Cameo. And did you park with Spot Hero today? Has your life been made better by some of the things that the entrepreneurs in this city have done for you today? And so I think it is that diversity.
Yep.
And some of them are very non-sexy. What Lisa Fiore and team are doing at Landscape Hub is a great example. How do you take the landscape industry and bring it online into a marketplace? It's not sexy, but it's really effective and really compelling. And so I think because Chicagoans have humility, and we are open to doing things that sometimes takes your sleeves rolled up and gets dirt under your fingernails, you can build really impressive businesses. And so that's what I've seen happen in the tech community.
So this is a toss-up question because there have been several questions from the audience on this subject. Penny, I know you were on the committee that was formed to attract Amazon to Chicago. Chris, Mike, I don't know if you were on that committee as well. We didn't get Amazon, life has gone on. But over the long term, how important is it to getting us on the map that we do attract a big name technology company to validate Chicago as a city where a very well-known, respected, world-leading technology company decides to locate?
You know, right now, if you were to ask, we have we have sales centers for these major corporations, but we don't have the technology hubs. Mm-hmm. And so I would submit, I don't know whether it's, I think we need to have companies that are producing their technology here. I give the example, I'll give a historical example. If you thought about real estate 30 years ago, the real estate syndication business, we had JMB. Mm-hmm. And JMB, when there was real estate syndication, it was a huge business before the 1986 Tax Act. We were the hub. And if you thought about the folks who were part of that company, when, as that business went away, those people now populate the leadership in real estate. They're, my peers and older in that field. I'm taking a historic example. But the point is that a lot of that capability resided here because of you had a few leadership companies. I think we need, I don't know if you're going to attract them from someplace else. I'm hoping you're growing them here.
I think that's the answer.
And I think they need to be grown here. And that means we have to have an environment that makes it easy for an entrepreneur to start a company, easy for them to access the talent they want, easy to get the capital, and they feel like the places they're hanging out, that's all happening around them, so it's not odd, but rather it's the norm. And that becomes something that, and it means those of us who are in the investment business, you're going to take more risk. We're used to, the private equity business is one business, but it means, if you're going to help the entrepreneur, if you're in the capital business, you're going to end up taking more risk to help these businesses get off the ground. And we have to have all of the aspects of the ecosystem firing. And the problem, one of the challenges we've learned from our data is just sheer size. Actually, if you put $1 into venture in Chicago, you get the best return on average, right, if you look at the data. However, the sheer volume, and my numbers are going to be wrong precisely, but directionally accurate, we do about $2 billion or $3 billion of venture capital investing a year. I think New York and Boston do about 5 times what we do a year, and the Silicon Valley does about 10 times what we do per year. So we're just also tiny in terms of that risk spectrum. And then there's some debate as to whether across the capital stack, as you go from seed, Series A, B, C, D, do we have money in all of those? Easy money, what do I mean? Money from the Chicago community based here, or that has serious representation here that can take you through that growth phase.
Yeah.
Michael,
I was going to build on that because I fully agree that why is building those companies here versus attracting companies from elsewhere so important? I think there's several drivers. The first is if we're building for a multi-generational outcome here, where one of the symptoms of that success will be a steady drumbeat of multi-billion-dollar exits, so that we don't have to keep trotting you on stage saying this is the billion-dollar exit. Plus we have Grubhub, and I think there was Groupon, and then everybody,
Jay's here.
right? And Jay at one of the two tech tables. Thank you for Field Glass. Thank you. But there's not enough of them. There need to be so many. We will have achieved success when there are enough that no one in the room can name them all.
Right.
And so what's the path from here to there? What's the path from it being an anomaly to it's just the symptom of success that the rest of the funnel is working correctly? And what are the other flywheel benefits that are generated from that symptom of success? Because when the capital is local, that means that those of you here who are in the investment business, you will have crushed it. General partner, here you come, and you will have brought on a whole bunch of other folks. They will have learned how to do that. They will have made some money so that they can take a risk and do that again. They will be more positively predisposed to the next Chicago company that comes in and pitches. And the men and women who work inside of those companies will have learned how to do it correctly. Building businesses that achieve scale is not magic, but it needs to be demystified. It's really hard to figure out all that stuff on your own if you haven't learned from observing great people do it a few levels above you. When we build those companies here, when we educate those women and men about how to do it, we de-risk their next attempt. And so there are many magical things about Silicon Valley that cities all over the world try to emulate. I don't think that's the right strategy, but one of the things that works well there is the sequential success.
Of how the wealth created through the sale of CleverSafe to IBM, obviously you've started Ocean, has spawned other ventures here in Chicago.
So one thing,
Or people that are investing in other ventures here.
yeah, one thing I'll say though is I had tried 2 other times before and failed, and I think that had I had more experience I could surround myself with, in terms of investors and the management team and the mid-level managers, I think the odds were higher that it wouldn't have taken me 3 tries. And I think that's the Silicon Valley thing. I mean, that's one of their advantages. And even now at Ocean, like finding 10 to 15-year product management experiences for enterprise software, there's not many in Chicago. It's a challenge. So at CleverSafe, one of the things we were able to do, because we never had a down round, which was fantastic, there were 80 people I know that was reported that made $1 million, but there was actually 40 people that made $5 million, which I think is more significant. Now the really good ones have been tied into some non-compete agreements, and those just expired recently. So I've talked to them recently, so I do expect in the coming years you'll see them start. I know Jim Dugan's here. He was an A-round investor. That was the that was the 50X round, which was a good round to be in. And so I'm sure he's recycling those dollars in investments. So not only, those dollars come back, to their fund, it allowed him to raise a bigger fund, and my guess is he could list off, here's all the companies I've been able to invest in.
Penny, you really, really hit hard this idea of inclusiveness, and P33 being an effort not just to help the existing tech community, but to help all Chicago. There's a question from the audience. And I cannot validate this research, but it says research shows that Chicago is behind in terms of graduating African American and Latino students with tech degrees. I know it's very, very early on, but could you kind of explain your vision in terms of how we bring the benefits of the P33 initiative to the neighborhoods of Chicago, just beyond the Loop and the West Loop and the traditional hubs for entrepreneurial activity?
So let me give an example from outside of Chicago. So we were just at Wichita State University on Friday, and I'll give you the story of Wichita. Wichita is an aviation hub, and basically, and this will get to your answer, they've got all of the efforts around, let's call it the technology capabilities, so that they can stay a place that's going to lead in aviation. But the other thing that they did is the university created its own community college called Wichita State Tech, where they are training folks to, who are able to accumulate skills that put them into the technology aspect of aviation at that level. The second thing that they've done is they've got their K through 12 system. There's certain skills that companies aviation companies are saying, I'm no longer, they were celebrating Wichita State University and saying, but I'm not going to actually support you anymore because you're not producing folks with a certain set of skills. And so the university went to the high school and said, I couldn't get it in the community college. I'm going to put these trainings into the high schools. And we need more of that connectivity. We have a phenomenal set of community colleges that are improving themselves, and Juan Salgado is a terrific guy leading them. But we need more, deeper connectivity between the technology industry and what's going on there. So, and we need greater connectivity down into the K-12 system in Chicago. That's how you're going to help folks from all over the city be able to put themselves on a path to be able to take advantage of Chicago, of the tech growth that we're hoping to have. The second is really, fundamentally creating an easier opportunity for folks at University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, to be able to also access what's happening in Chicago while they're in school, so that it's not such a distance between those two campuses. And that's something that I know DPI is meant to accomplish. I know that's going on more and more partnership with the University of Illinois Engineering School at Champaign-Urbana. University of Chicago have just done a partnership on quantum. We need to infuse, in order for more of Chicagoans to benefit, every one of those initiatives has to have a workforce effort. DDMI, which is part of the UI Labs, was supposed to, when you won that grant, federal grant, create a technology training for folks in our city. I don't think it's at the scale it needs to be. So we need to take the assets we already have and insist that not only are you producing great research and great technological outcomes, but you're also working down into the education system and that's what we mean by greater alignment of education with what employers need. And certainly people in Chicago want that.
We have about 5 minutes left, and I'm going to present this question to all three of you, starting with Mike. So we have a captive audience of 300 or 400 business people in the room today. And I think all of them, I'm guessing many of you are saying, what can I do? What can I do individually? What can I do through my company to advance the mission of P33? So if each of you could give one actionable step that people in this room can take, what would it be?
So I would say, for me, it starts with recognizing that you are the resource influencers and controllers. I don't know what the aggregate number of dollars and jobs that this group of people represent, but it's a big number. And so just starting as a starting place with the recognition that a group like this actually can move the needle when conscious action is taken, I think is a great starting place. And so thinking about those two big things that Penny was talking about initially on P33, I think first, if we can just, as I mentioned earlier, open our minds and our doors to a Chicago-oriented, a Chicago-based business that has something that may be able to help you stay more competitive. Because remember, if you're in a traditional industry, there's some tech company out there in some other city who has your name on the prey list. They are coming for you. And so you may as well band together with the tech leaders we have here who can help you thrive and help you manage that. And the second is on this idea of inclusion. Find a way to invite someone into your company as an intern, as a frontline worker who may not have had that opportunity before. I greatly believe that talent is distributed equally and opportunity is not, and is beholden upon all of us to take a proactive step in making it easier for someone who may not find their way to your office through the normal channels to get their first job there.
Mike, how do they find that person, though?
I bet there's someone in your office who is passionate about this very topic, who has closer ties to a community, a Latino community or an African American community, or a white community who didn't grow up on the right side of the tracks. There is someone in your office who's passionate about it and who would be incredibly flattered if you anointed them as the person to go make this happen. Create 3 internships this summer. How about that?
Chris?
Yeah, I'm going to get a little more specific on how, as an established company, even as a small company, you can become more of a leader in adopting technology. Because it's not just about where creators of technology are, it's where users of technology are, because that's a big part of leadership. So, I mean, there certainly are companies in Chicago like Allstate that has a reputation as a kind of a leading edge company for IT deployment. But MetLife in New York City is also well known. And what they do is they have innovation teams. Within a company, whether it's doing insurance, banking, retail, doesn't matter, you know, there's people that kind of run the lines of businesses and the systems, and they're really designed to think a little more short term. In order to have the ability to embrace kind of disruptive or just big change, you need some kind of dedicated external thought. So what MetLife does is they have an innovation team in the IT department that just, their job is to bring innovation in. So the way they do it is they've established relationships with venture capitalists that invest in the kinds of areas that they are in as a company. They regularly meet with them and their portfolio companies to identify, okay, here's 10 companies we'd bring in. They also maintain a list of the problems that they have internally, the solutions for which they seek an answer. And they match it, you know, they match those together, you know, on an active, ongoing basis. And that's the kind of effort it takes. Now, the payoff is real, but, you know, that's the kind of effort they take, and that's the kind of thing that we're talking about.
Penny?
Help us get the word out. We have things that we need to do, but we also need to tell our story around the country. And that's something we're working on, as Chris said earlier, the 2 words, the 2 sentences, and the 200 words, if you will. But we need to change the perception of Chicago. And some of that is substantive work we have to do, and some of it is PR. And the second is, and along those lines, is internally, we've got as much recruiting to do here. Mike is very optimistic because we're keeping the largest percentage. We're still losing a large percentage of people. And so of talent. And that's talent that may go on to start the next large company, and we need to work to reverse that as a trend.
Mike, Chris, Penny, thank you so much for a very thoughtful and informative
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Well done. Well done.
Thank you all for coming, and have a wonderful balance of your day. Thank you. We're adjourned.